So there are phenomena that happens on occasion that is naturally inexplicable, in which the best inference that can be made is a supernatural causal explanation based off of the context and the features of the phenomenon. And then we can infer from that within the context and within other considerations that the Christian theism specifically is the best explanation for that.
Awesome. Cool. Did you want to go over some slides, or do you want to give some preliminaries on these, or do you want to just kind of take callers right away and then give cases?
I think we can. I know we already have some callers lined up, so I don't want to keep them waiting too long. So
you want to just bring up the callers, and we can bring up cases and
just do them as they come up, or with other stuff. Yeah, I know this is going to be pretty.
Well, let's do that. Well, for the first guy we got, I've seen him with a YouTube channel already. So
boy, yep, Steven.
Oh no, he's hot. Oh yeah, I can't say stuff like that. The Muslims will think I'm gay. So, you know that SpongeBob reference where Squidward's looking at Squilliam, and he goes, "Oh no, he's hot." That's what's happening here. That's all. What's up, Steven?
Hey, Ben. It's nice to meet you finally. I've talked to Caleb here and there. Me and Caleb are best friends, actually. So
no, okay, dude, I'm gonna kick this guy off. No, Caleb and I are best friends.
I don't know, man.
Okay, you all can share me. Well, in fairness, Derek and I are friends, and Dan's also friends with Derek, and Derek is friends with Steven, and that's how we kind of got to.
We just have a love triangle happening.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And it's funny because I think Steven's made response videos to some of your stuff, fan, and then so I was hoping the beef could start, but.
Yeah, there's no way. The only way you're gonna have really beef with me is if you're a jerk to me. So
there you go.
No, there won't be any beef here. I try to be very good faith for the most part, unless you're Jay Dyer. Sorry, I have to say.
Unless you deserve it.
Yeah, unless you deserve it. But no. I'm looking forward to the discussion. It's nice to meet you, Then. I've been watching your stuff for a while, even before when you were on Exploring Reality. So it was cool to see you and Mike kind of team up. So yeah, I mean, I've been watching your stuff for a while.
Cool, man.
So Steven does a lot on the resurrection. I know that's like his particular thing. So from what my conversations, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he's open to miracles. He's not like a hard naturalist. He's a skeptical agnostic, as I hear. But he is skeptical of the resurrection and some of the inferences that come from that. So maybe that'd be a good place that we could sort of start, unless you'd like to take a different direction, Steven.
Yeah, no, thanks for the introduction. So just a little bit of background on me. So I was a Christian up until about 26, 27. So for the past 8 years, I've considered myself an agnostic. I'm not really interested in the debate regarding atheism, regarding whether or not atheism is a lack of belief or not. So I just prefer to categorize myself as an agnostic. I'm not a naturalist. I'm not a physicist. So I'm not, closed off a priori to miracles or the supernatural. So I'm open to miracles. I think that there's, and I know Caleb mentioned the resurrection. We don't need to turn this into a resurrection debate, but I think that there's better evidence for modern miracles, or miracles that are, a little bit closer to us than the resurrection is. I think there's better evidence for some of those. But at the same time, I feel reluctant to give them a label of miracles. So wherever you guys want to take this is good with me. I'm just there's a lot of different phenomena and events that that I've surveyed that I don't know what the explanation is. Again, I'm not trying to throw a naturalistic label on it, but I just don't know what to do with my worldview because I'm not a naturalist, but I'm not a theist, so I really don't know what to infer from those.
I'm smiling because what you're saying is what every single person that I've talked to that eventually ended up becoming a Christian because of the argument for miracles says. Caleb, am I wrong?
I think I know some of the people you have in mind, and maybe that's accurate. But I mean, Steven was a former Christian apologist. I know he was
really? I didn't know that about you.
No, yeah. I said you should watch his interview on Derek's channel. It's actually really good. I think you're still a big fan of the contingency argument, right, Steven? Not to go down that route, but just like, you're relatively well read on some of that literature.
Yeah, I just when I was a Christian apologist myself, I mean, when I was a Christian, I wasn't like on YouTube that much, at all really, but I had a blog that I would write Yeah, the contingency argument for me was like my go-to philosophical argument for God. I thought it was the strongest, and to this day, I still think it's a very strong argument. I mean, obviously, I don't necessarily view it as sound as I did before, but I do think it's a strong argument that needs to be dealt with by the skeptic community or by atheists. Yeah, so I mean, I was Christian up until 27, and I believed in miracles up until that point. And it's just nowadays, again, as I said, there's lots of occurrences, lots of events that I would just be a little bit reluctant to give the label miracle, because I think there's still a lot of obscurity and ambiguity with regards to them. And I think that the argument from miracles kind of pushes and pulls with the argument from divine hiddenness, and I'm very convinced by the argument from divine hiddenness. So I think that's kind of what stops me from affirming those, putting the label miracles on types of events.
Yeah. Like so let me ask a little clarifying question here, because we could be operating like and this is going to be a good clarifying question, so that way we don't actually end up talking past each other.
Sure.
Because this is going to be a fundamentally like epistemological question. So when you say you're worried about giving the label of miracle to any of these events, I can understand it in a few different ways. One is going to be in the ontological sense, and another could be in the like rival hypothesis comparison sense, right? So like, for instance, when you say, I don't want to give it a label of miracle, are you saying it's because like there's conceptual issues that you have with the concept, or is it because you think like the probability that this is a miracle is not higher than the probability of it not being a miracle?
Yeah, I think good question. I think probability wise, I think just epistemically, it's not clear enough for me to say, oh yeah, this is a miracle from God. I mean, I might go as far as saying, this looks like it probabilistically has a good chance of being something supernatural or having a supernatural cause or a catalyst. But as far as being a, miracle from the divine, from God, I feel like there's too much obscurity, too much ambiguity, even in some of the best documented cases. Just to take a quick example, like the miracle at Zaytun, that's something that I've always been fascinated with. Not always, like over the past couple of years, I've been really fascinated with it. And I think that's one of those where skeptics have a difficult time trying to give a naturalistic explanation. And I have yet to hear a sufficient and persuasive skeptical naturalistic explanation for it. At the same time, like to me, it seems like there's something going on there. There very well might be something that's supernatural, but to me, it's still obscure enough that I don't know what's going on. Like, it doesn't seem clear to me that that's a miracle from God. Even though the sightings are of the Virgin Mary, I don't even know if that is the Virgin Mary, right? I just don't know what it is. I don't know what label to put on it, but miracle to me just doesn't seem to be an inference that I can make.
I think a lot of this too is about like how much divine psychologizing do we want to do, right? And you've said the divine hiddenness thing, which is interesting in terms of like what models do we have and what would you expect under those models? So I am sympathetic a little bit to say the idea, okay, the Zaytun apparitions, which for the audience who doesn't know, there was a series of very large-scale Marian apparitions that happened in the late 1960s, early 1970s in Zaytun, Egypt, on top of a church, seen by hundreds of thousands of people. And the apparition never talked, never said, hello, guys, I'm the Virgin Mary, convert to Christianity or whatever. So obviously that would be even better. But I feel like for almost any miracle that we can conceive of, you could think of even better evidence that we don't have, right? And it's like the fact that you can do that with almost anything isn't that much. So I guess I would say, like, yes, there are some ambiguities to where, like, I can't explain every aspect of, well, why didn't she speak, or why did God heal this person and not this other person, right? Those are fair criticisms, or not criticisms, questions to ask. But I feel like those are less difficult to answer than, well, why did this happen at all? It's like I can come up with some kind of not super implausible in my mind explanation for maybe why God providentially would want to do something in this way. But I feel like coming up with an explanation on the other side where it's not that in terms of like, well, why naturalistically or supernaturalistically this happened, without that would be a lot more difficult.
Right.
So it's like the problem of evil is, why does God allow all these horrendous evils if he's all good? But the problem of miracles is, why are these unexpected good things that like shouldn't physically be possible happening? It's kind of the concept of that. And for me, I think that there are some theodicies that, while they're not perfect, like you can kind of sort of make sense of it. Those to me are more comprehensive than like even just beginning to speculate in terms of like this hard data we have in some of these miracle cases, so far I can see. So I guess maybe there's like an imbalance in terms of the evidential quality.
So, and also, by the way, Stephen, I don't want to like dogpile here, and I want Caleb to kind of be like the star of the show today. So I'm just trying to diagnose things right now still.
Sure.
So here's an interesting thing, because you are right that, you know, problem of evil and divine hiddenness are actually going to play a factor into how we assess miracle claims, right?
Yeah.
So in instances like this, and tell me if you agree or disagree, I think like a good way to go approach this topic is basically by just conditionalizing on different things. So we can look at a particular miracle claim and go, okay, so here's this miracle claim. How likely is this if in our background knowledge, we have a theodicy that actually like helps dissolve the problem of divine hiddenness and suffering, right? Because, right, I think you would agree, if we have a good theodicy that does that, then the priors are going to be higher for a miracle.
Sure.
But if we don't have that, we can conditionalize on that, and then kind of, you get the point. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think that's going to be the most helpful way, because otherwise what ends up happening is we talk about a miracle, and then we end up kind of like going back and forth about arguing about hiddenness and suffering when that's not really the main topic.
Yeah.
And that's an approach that kind of helps us table those things in a fair way. I don't know what you think on that, Caleb, even, but
no, I think you're steering the conversation in a good direction. And I didn't, mean to bring up the problem of divine hiddenness so we can start discussing.
I didn't take it that way.
We can keep it on miracles, but I think it's quite pertinent to the issue. And you're right. I mean, it affects our priors and it affects our background knowledge. And I think one of the other things that affects my personal background knowledge is obviously my experience. And unfortunately, even when I was a Christian, I guess I was unfortunate to not really experience too many things that I would have considered miraculous. I attended a non-denominational church, and it's a pretty big church in my city. And they used to have yearly healing conferences. So you would have, this very well-known pastor who was like a healing pastor come, and he would do these conferences once a year, and you would have people come in droves and be prayed over. And, you would have testimonies afterwards, and it would be things like, I had pain in my back and now I no longer have pain in my back. But there was just nothing that really pushed me to say like, wow, the only label I can give that is something that was miraculous. And just in my day-to-day life, my wife is still Christian, her family's Christian, I'm surrounded by Christians, and yet there's no testimony that they've ever provided. And my mom's still Christian, and she'll tell me things that she considers miraculous, but to me, it just doesn't warrant that that label. And so I think part of it is just that I've never experienced anything that to me is the mark of the divine. And so that definitely affects my priors, because had I experienced something like that, maybe I would be more comfortable in making that inference. Just to give some quick anecdotal examples, I used to work with an atheist, and he was an atheist when I was a Christian. And despite the fact that he was like a Nietzschean atheist, like nihilistic, but he even recounted something that he experienced. And because he was an atheist, he didn't put the label miracle on it, but he experienced something very strange near a Jewish synagogue. And he was kind of like me. He was like, I don't know what to make of it, but it was incredibly strange. I don't even remember all the details, but I just remember, my eyes were wide when he was recounting his experience. But again, he experienced something like that. I never have. I've just only ever heard stories. And so, I feel unfortunate in that sense, because, and I don't want to take this back to divine hiddenness, but it's like, had I experienced something like that, I think my priors would be completely different,
And I'm very sympathetic to a lot of that, Stephen, which is ironic because, as much as we look into this stuff, like there are, I won't get too specific here just for the details, but like Fan and I both know people who are like Catholics or Eastern Orthodox or particular sects that we are not in terms of denominationally. And I would be lying if I said that there wasn't a sense of cognitive dissonance.
People don't know my denomination. So
I'm not sure. That's true. I'm not, or whatever it falls under. Yeah, that's true.
We know you're Muslim, Fan. We know you're Muslim.
There's actually Scientology.
This is the proof.
Scientology.
Yeah, he didn't tell me Scientology actually is the correct answer. But
I saw he had a poster of Tom Cruise. I wondered why that was.
But anyway, So like you'll have these like really interesting miracle claims where you have like Eucharistic hosts turning into like allegedly heart tissue, or like the Virgin Mary appearing and telling people like consecrate Russia to my immaculate heart. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that as like an evangelical? Yeah. So like, they're like, so all these Catholic friends that I have are like, well, like obvious, dude, like obviously the Virgin Mary is appearing in Zaytun. Like, how could you not? If this was anything else, you'd be like, come on, dude. But like, I get it. Like, there's some, it's like, oh, but there's so much stuff in this religion, like this particular sect of like, I just don't, I'm not comfortable with. So at what point do you like take it on where you say this is authoritative, this is God has spoken, so shut up about your other denominational or issues you have philosophically and just take it on that authority versus, well, I feel like I have to get these stuff worked out before I accept the miracle. And so I'm very sympathetic in that same boat as you are. But again, I think that we just have to I think it's more that we set criteria beforehand so that we don't move the goalposts. Just say, okay, this is what we would look for in like a miracle. So like with the healing cure, for example, which is what I specialize in, and I think Fan to some extent too. I think that's the best kind of examples you have because the documentation tends to be better and the methods are more clear. Like when it comes to, how would we investigate lights on top of an Egyptian temple or a church that kind of look humanoid? Like, I mean, it's what, it's kind of hard to know.
There's ways to do that kind of stuff, but it's like,
but it's a bit more speculative.
YouTube stream for the purposes of the stream like it's just, we're not going to get into math.
No, I get it. But like, I was going to say, but when it comes to healings, like we already have non-controversial ways of saying X person had this disease and then now they don't have this disease on this date.
Right.
And like that would be accepted in any court of law. It's not very difficult to do that. We're not making any new methods here to accommodate that. So I think when you get to that, you have something like the Lambertini criteria, which is what the Catholic Church has been using past like 300 years, which is like you have an illness that's progressive, it's getting worse, it's organic, it's not psychological, it's very serious, and then it heals instantaneously, completely, permanently, and without like medication. Like all of those stuff together, you could say, well, maybe there's one disease that has a few of those qualities, but like all those in tandem, it's really hard. And then you have the combination of that where the instantaneous cure was in a religious context where they were praying or a saint appeared to them or they went to some pilgrimage site or whatever. It's really hard for me to not make that inference where it's like, if this is some weird natural law where this just happened to go into remission, it's really convenient that the only documented example of this going to remission is when they were like being prayed for or something, So I think those to me seem like reasonable criteria. And if you can find examples that follow those, which I think there are some, then that would be where you sort of make that inference. So would you agree with that, Stephen, or do you think that any of those are?
Yeah, no. And again, I think this is where I become disillusioned with the skeptic community because they will hand wave those away like, oh, there's spontaneous remission. And just, we haven't talked about this, Caleb, but after reading your article, I did send it to some individuals who I wanted to get their opinion on it. Your article did, what is it? Did God
heal amputees? Yeah, which for those watching is on Academia if you want to check it out.
Yeah, great article. And, I had a skeptic friend of mine who just hand waved it away and tried to come up with a very convoluted ad hoc rationalization. And I wasn't persuaded by that. But it just seems like skeptics try to do that because a lot of them have a commitment to naturalism, which I don't have. So there are, again, like the case that you surveyed in that article and other cases, I'm not averse to saying possibly something supernatural is going on here. For me, it's just, again, I don't know that I have enough information to still make the inference that this is clearly, unambiguously from God. And I guess, maybe the pertinent question is, if you believe miracles are from God, I mean, what is their end, right? Are they a form of divine communication? Because I think that's the important question. And that's the part that gets me, because if you're going to affirm that miracles like that are a form of divine communication, I would say that they're still obscure. They're not 100% clear. We could talk about the probabilities and what probability would make it clear, right? But to me, they're just not. There's still ambiguity. There's still obscurity. So for me, it's like, if miracles are divine communication from God, then they're not sufficient communication, in my opinion. And I have a whole video on my channel called "Why Can't God Communicate Clearly?" And it's more geared towards the Bible, but I think it applies here, right? I think if God is performing these miracles, despite the fact that some of them are very compelling, they're few and far between, and it's not clear what the divine message is. And so, again, for me, it's, if they are divine communication, they're not the best. And if they're not divine communication, then I don't know what to do with them, right? I just don't know what to do with the miracles.
That's a great. Sorry, do you mind if I take this thing real fast? And then,
no, go ahead.
No, that's a great question, and I struggle with this as well, as I kind of had alluded to earlier, right? Where there's a lot of stuff because it's easy. Well, it may not be easy, but if you're someone who's not a priori naturalist and you're open to that, to say, yeah, maybe there's some weird supernatural entities out there. But when you start getting to, okay, but it's making vindication claims, it's saying this is the theology you have to hold to, or like that hell exists or something like that. Okay, well, now suddenly the stakes are a lot higher and we might want to be very careful with what we're accepting here.
Right.
So I would think, and I'm still working my way through this because of the stuff I talked about earlier, but I think that you could broadly categorize there as being, I would call it a rejuvenation miracle and a vindication miracle. So rejuvenation, I think, is what most of them are. And again, Than might disagree with me on this analysis, but I don't think he would, which is where God is basically doing a miracle of mercy in order to help people who may already be believers, but to inspire their faith. Because, people will check off that they're Christian, or but they've been nominal or something like that. They might have crises of faith, as we all do. So in the case that you're talking about with Kalanda, right, virtually everyone in that area was Catholic. So it's not like they're being convinced of something that they didn't already believe is true in the first place. But to have that reinvigoration of the miracle, or to have someone who's been sick for 10 years with a disease and they have their prayers answered, that obviously transforms their life and the life of their loved ones who are aware of it. So I think those kinds of miracles, you could say the messaging is not super clear, and God might be doing it just because he wants a relationship with that person and it strengthens their faith. So I think that one's a bit less there. But I think that a vindication miracle would be a miracle that happens in a context that is mostly hostile, or at least not already predisposed to it. So again, like in the Bible, in the New Testament, when Jesus' ministry or the apostles' ministry, when you're going out to basically a mission field and you're converting people and you're teaching things and you're speaking authoritatively and you're using miracles to say, hey guys, I'm speaking God's message here. I think that's a much more specific kind of miracle. And I don't think those are as common, but I do think that's the kind you see in the Bible. The prophets and stuff like that, where they're doing it. Basically any religion being founded, even Joseph Smith, as much as I think he's a con artist and don't think it was a miracle, like in principle, that would be what he was doing, where it's this new idea that we have to sell to people. And this is what's meant to be convincing. So that's the way that I see it. So for something like Zaytun, where this happens in a country where most of the people are Muslim, but Muslims have a high view of Mary, right? Like, okay, maybe it was meant to be like a peaceful, like, hey, Egypt, Israel, stop fighting. This happened right after the war. Let's have unity between Copts and Muslims. That could be a rejuvenation miracle. I think that's plausible. And that's why the Virgin Mary may not have been like, hey, guys, convert to Christianity. If that had happened, maybe they actually would have thought it was a fraud and they would have persecuted Christians even harder. I don't know. So I think that with the first kind, you wouldn't necessarily expect there to be this clear communication of here's the message that I'm signaling off of. I think with the vindication ones, you would. But I would say that with the biblical examples, you do have that where it's like Jesus or Paul or Peter speaking very authoritatively when they do this, right? Like even when Jesus forgives sins of the paralyzed guy in Mark 2, and he says, I forgive you for your sins, the Pharisees are horrified by this and say he's becoming blasphemy. And then he has the guy get up and walk to kind of make a point. So that's how I would see it. But I don't know, Fan, if you agree with that or
no. I agree with that dichotomy. The only thing I'm gonna argue is that like miracles of mercy still function as miracles of vindication as well. I would argue. Just so far,
they're not mutually exclusive. That's true,
right? Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. So like a miracle of mercy can be also just function as a vindication of like the religious message in the context that the miracle operates within.
What are you classifying as miracles of mercy, Fan?
I'm just using a different word than Caleb.
Rejuvenation
for rejuvenation.
Yeah. People who already are like believing in the doctrine and they're not like converting out of it because they are, but maybe they're more invigorated with their faith or something.
Yeah. And I think I don't want to remark too much about biblical miracles because I view those with a much lower, much lower credence than
we're just conditionalizing on it.
No, you're fine. But I think the proportion of historical Christian miracles is, in my view, proportional to like the evidence for Christianity itself, biblical Christianity. And by that I mean I don't view Christianity as very likely true, but I view it as much more likely than, let's say, Islam or Mormonism or other religions. In the same vein, I think a lot of the historical, like the case for historical miracles that you can make, there's miracles from other religions, but again, Christianity, the Christian miracles are in proportion a little bit better and have better evidence than Muslim miracles and again, Mormon miracles and
like,
what have you. But
what
sorry, go ahead.
what Islamic miracles have you heard of that actually have like that one actually would be constituted as a miracle, right? Rather than like, look at this verse, it says something special. How can that
You don't
happen?
mean like the Quranic or the Hadithic ones?
Yeah,
like,
or like other attempts are like, look, you recite the Quran and the cows love it. Like this is stuff this is stuff I hear. So like if you actually have a case that you think,
no, great question. With regards to like history, I know that there's supposed miracles of Islamic saints, and I've looked into a little bit of them, but they're usually written hundreds of years later. So I'm not impressed by them. But the claims are there. But I mean, I've had Muslim friends, and in fact, I used to have a Muslim coworker who converted from Christianity to Islam. Don't ask me why. Wow. I was always like, why? It might be because his wife is Muslim, but I don't know. I always found that rather strange. I was like, if you're gonna, why, might as well just have stayed in Christianity, because I don't view.
Yeah, one of my friends at my gym is an atheist, like a hardcore atheist, but he's a friend, and he's like, hey man, I disagree with everything you stand for, but I still hope you win.
Compared to the Muslims,
yeah, absolutely, and so. But, he would relay just the typical anecdotal types of these aren't historical miracles, but, he would relay the typical anecdotal types of miraculous claims like, oh, my wife prayed and then this happened, or, this happened in our life and this event transpired. And so, that's just another, for me, despite the fact that the historical case for miracles is in degree, it's better for Christianity. I don't see that there's a difference in kind necessarily. And I think if you view these types of miracles as some type of communication for God, this is again why I view it as insufficient, because most people don't know about these miracles. A lot of people don't know about Zaytun. A lot of people don't know about the amputee who was healed in the 16th century, or who possibly was healed. Most people encounter miracles in their claims of miracles in their everyday lives. And again, this is why I'm telling you, in my life, I haven't experienced anything like that, but I have tons of Christian friends who relate Christian miracles. I've had Muslim coworkers who have relayed their supposed Muslim or their Islamic miracles. I even had a coworker who was like all new agey, and she did tarot card reading and she was into astrology, and she would relay some stuff to me that was just, again, I don't know what to do with that. I'm not claiming that you're deceived or that you're a liar, but she would tell me stories that I was incredulous. It was very difficult for me to believe them. And then again, I had that atheist coworker who experienced something possibly supernatural near a Jewish synagogue. So again, for me, if miracles are a form of divine communication, I just don't view them as sufficient. I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, I think there's a misstep here, because Caleb and I are saying it's a vindication rather than like a message, right? So for instance, if Caleb is like, imagine you and Caleb meet up at a coffee shop and you don't know each other, and Caleb goes up to you and goes, hey, Steven, did you know that like I'm this president of this company or something like that, right? And then you're like, well, why would I ever believe that? But then I come along and I go up to Caleb and I go, oh my gosh, you're the president of this company.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything to you as a message, but what I just did vindicated his claim. Right. So there's a difference between like an actual message and then a vindication of a message.
Sure.
And so if a community is like proclaiming a particular message, and then within that religious community, in the context of the message that they're delivering, a miracle happens.
Yeah.
God is vindicating that message, but not he's not directly communicating that message by himself. And then you said something else that's interesting, which is like the miracles that Caleb and I bring up, nobody really hears about them. And in one sense, that's true, but in another sense, it's not, because people are like, we're sitting here and we're going to get a couple thousand views.
We're trying to do that, Joe. Right? We're trying to make ground on that. Yeah.
And so, this like, and this is structurally similar to even stuff that happens with the problem of evil and divine hiddenness, which I think it commits a fallacy called like the protological fallacy, which is on a broad scale, it's like judging states of affairs based off of the way things are, rather than the way things can be and are trending to, or something like that, right? And so like a lot of the concerns that you're pointing to seem to me to be underdeterminate as like qualifications for thinking that these miracles are not going to be most likely like from God, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I packed a lot in a short frame there, so I'm curious to see what you think.
And you can respond to this, Stephen. Just as much as I love this conversation, I know we have other people in the
Yeah, this is really fun. We should schedule
hey,
like an actual.
I think Steve and I are working on trying to get a stream together at some point later this month. So we can definitely go more on that in that one. But go ahead and see if you want to answer. I just want to make sure people who are waiting in line are not going to drop off because we did that.
So in line with the whole vindication thing. So yeah, fair enough. Point received on that. I guess I would just kind of pivot back to my point regarding, I think that the miracle claims, the historical miracle claims for Christianity are better in degree, but they're not necessarily different. They're different in degree, but they're not necessarily different in kind. And so for me, again, there's just too much ambiguity, too much obscurity. And, based on what you said then, like, yes, we're talking about these miracles, but we're the type of people who were interested in apologetics, and we're the type of people who are looking for stuff like this. I guarantee you, if I went and asked 100 of, I don't even know if I have 100 close Christian friends, but let's say I went and asked, 20 of my closest Christian friends, have you heard about this miracle, this miracle, this miracle, this miracle? I guarantee you 99% of them or 95% of them would say, I've never heard of that. Right. And those are Christians. And I just think a lot of these things are obscure. They're too ambiguous, again, for me to just make any clear inference here. Even as a vindication, I will admit that they add vindication, they increase the credence for Christianity, but just not to any type of threshold that makes me comfortable or persuaded to make any inference that God is behind them, that God is behind them, as opposed to maybe just something supernatural or something that I don't know the explanation of.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, we should definitely, like, the three of us schedule a time where we can chat, where we don't have people in the queue, because this is a really fun conversation.
No, yeah, I don't want to hog the mic. I know there's it looks like there's at least 5 other people in the chat.
We got a lot of.
We were worried that no one was going to show up at this time, but clearly that wasn't the case. So that's your problem. I think you all could almost be like brothers or like cousins or something. You all kind of look similar too. So I think you're all like
no. You look like you lift, Steven. Do you lift?
I do, yeah.
Heck yeah, brother. Heck yeah.
I'm not. I don't think I'm as jacked as you then, but I appreciate you noticing that I can lift. No, you guys are free to jump to the next caller. Again, like it was really nice to meet you, Dan, because I've been watching your stuff for a while, and of course, I told you me and Caleb were best friends. So
we're
if you want, I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't want to obviously just like I don't know, Than. If you want me to like give him your email or something like that, I know you don't want to just be giving personal information out like that.
No, my Inspiring Philosophy email is public. Just Than@inspiringphilosophy.com.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't mind giving my email or even my number to people I know trust. So I trust you, Caleb, and I don't mind you giving my stuff.
I trust you through transitive property, but I'm sure you already know. Sure. I'm sure you already know we're dealing with.
Just to make sure that the Dow guys don't get a hold of it again. Yeah.
I don't think they care too much about in fact, they probably cheer on my material, those Dow guys. Just
make something against Islam and Muhammad, and then they'll come after you.
Yeah, exactly.
Any atheist online can make fun of the Bible. You have to have real balls to have to go after the Quran, and that's what it shows you.
And that's true. That's not a wasp's nest I want to poke right now. So.
No, I get it. Yeah, man. No, we should definitely schedule a time to like talk some more. The three of us, because also people I like you, so
I appreciate it.
But the thing that people are gonna want to see is people getting they're gonna want to watch some clash, and I just don't want to do that with you.
Yeah, we need to make a thumbnail that says like heated debate, and then like edit it to where
it's just we're all just nice to each other.
Edit it so we're talking. Edit it so that Dan says you look like you don't lift, Steven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Steven.
Thanks so much, man. Nice meeting you, bro.
Yeah. We'll see you guys. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.